Hi guys, and welcome to Magic. Every single company I have worked for as an enterprise developer has had a translation code, meaning a piece of code that translates buttons, small labels, checkboxes, etc. into a whole range of languages, which depends upon which languages this particular company needs to support. And every single company I've worked for have solved the problem the exact same way. So this is a well-known pattern for supporting translations into a multitude of different languages. And the application have been based upon two database tables. Normally, often one called languages, which is a list of all the languages the application supports. Another one called typically entities or keys or translations, as I've called it here, that points with a foreign key, constraint foreign key, on the local column into the local column of the supported languages database table. So here I have a database script that creates a database called Babelfish, and then it creates those two tables. In this video, I'm going to use this database script to create a generic web application that arguably solves your enterprise entire translation issues. And I'm going to create it in 1 second. But first, if you haven't set up Magic, there's a link in the description of this YouTube video to another video which demonstrates how to set up Magic. In addition, there's going to be a link in the description of this YouTube video that points to a DZone article where you can get this SQL script that creates these tables for you, which is our starting ground. First, I'm going to copy this SQL script. Then I'm going to go into Magic. In Magic, I'm going to click at SQL menu item here. And please realize you need at the very least version 5.9.3 of Magic to make this actually work. Then I'm going to paste in my script here, my SQL code. Then I'm going to evaluate it. I've now created my database, and in fact I can verify it by clicking the Crudify menu and selecting my Babelfish database, and then I can look at its tables. Of course, this is for MySQL only, but if you're capable of actually porting the SQL script to a SQL Server, you can just as well use a SQL Server if you wish. And here you see I have two tables, and we can have a look at the metadata for these two tables. Here you see local, key, and content, for instance, for my translations table. Then I'm going to go down to my create HTTP REST endpoint. It doesn't matter which table you start out with, they will be exactly similar. Then I'm going to add comma, space, translator. This becomes a role in the system that is allowed to access this post or create HTTP REST endpoints. Then I'm going to do the same for, actually for read, I'm going to remove all authorization. For updates, I'm going to add the role of translator. And for delete, I'm going to add the role of translator. It doesn't really matter if your translator role actually exists at this point or not. You can easily add it later. Then I'm going to go to the bottom of this form, and then I'm going to click Crudify selected table. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing with my languages table. I'm going to remove all authorization on the read endpoint and add comma, translator on all the other HTTP REST endpoints. And I now have 10 HTTP REST endpoints in my backend. And in fact, I can verify that by going to my endpoints and clicking Show Endpoints, and then filter for Babelfish. fish here. You see 10 HTTP REST endpoints. Before I continue here though, I'm going to go back to Cruddified and I'm going to select my authentication database. Then I'm going to also Crudify all of these tables. So I now have 14 endpoints for authorization and 10 endpoints for translating. Then I'm going to go back to my endpoints, and here if you click show endpoints and you filter such that you can see your Babel fish HTTP REST endpoints, you can click, for instance, languages, get the read endpoint here, and I can invoke it immediately. Here you can see I get one language back. When I'm done playing around with this, I can hide my endpoints. I can give my application a name. Let me first verify that I don't have anything in my downloads folder here. I'm gonna name it Babel Fish. Then I'm gonna select the template, and then I can optionally apply a file comment header. Typically this is copyright file comment header for each of my front-end Angular apps. And then I can click generate. And that was 1 second to create my entire front end. I'm going to unzip this zip file that I was given. Then I'm going to open up another terminal window, go to my downloads folder, and I'm going to open up another instance of Visual Studio Code. Then from here, I'm going to open a terminal window. I'm going to type npm link, and this might take some time. Just please let it finish what it is doing. When npm link is done, I can type ng space serve space -- port space 4201, for instance, to serve my front end over port 4201. This will also take some time. Just let it finish what it is doing. When ng-serve is finished doing its thing, I can go to Google Chrome. I can open up localhost :4201. At which point I'm asked to log in. I'm going to log in with my root account. And then I'm going to go to my auth menu item here. And I'm going to create a new user called John, with a password of John and a password of John. This user, I want to be one of my back office workers that happens to belong to the role of translator. I'm going to click OK here, then I'm going to click my John guy, then I'm going to add them to the translator role. This is typically a user that you want to allow backend access to the administrative front end you're looking at now, which allows people to actually go through and translate your entities, your language entities. Currently I have one language here called English. I can create another one called NO, Norwegian. I can create another one called ES, Spanish, and so on. But you can create any amount of languages you wish here, and then when you create a translation entity here, then you choose one of your languages. EN, for instance, close. Can create the equivalent of that word in Norwegian. You use the same key, but you use the local version in the content of that particular word, look, and so on. There's one thing that bothers me here, though, is that I have to manually type my local. I happen to know I have 3 locals because they're looked up into another database. Remember, this started out as a referential integrity foreign key from my translation database table into my languages database table. Now, Magic happens to have a front-end component that actually solves that problem for me. So if I now go back to my Angular front-end code and I open up the app, first I open up the source folder, then I open up the app folder, then I expand the helpers folder here. Then I can find a selector component.ts here, which actually is a component that takes care of referential integrity foreign key types of items when you are creating new items using the scaffolded Angular frontend. So I'm just going to copy this code, and then I'm going to expand components, then I'm going to expand translations, then I'm going to expand modules, then I'm going to open up edit translations.component.html here, and then I'm going to find my local field here. My local field here is basically the stuff you see here on the screen. Then I'm going to remove it. I'm going to paste in my copied code, and of course remove the asterisks. Now this end resulting code, which I'm pasting in here, you can also find in the DSON article, which you can find a link to in the description of this YouTube video. From here, I'm going to have to slightly modify it. My key is local. This is my foreign key in my translations database table. Key is local, and it points to the language column in my languages database table. The model is data.entity, and the service or get items callback is service.languages_get. Service, of course, is dependency injected service HTTP REST HTTP service, which you can see here, that's injected into my module form. Then I can just save this module form. I can go back to Google Chrome, and I can create translation entities. Whoops, sorry, I forgot to apply a CSS class here. Let's try again. Yet again, you can find this entire code in the DSON article I'm going to link to in the YouTube video. If I now create a new item, you will see I no longer have a text field here, but I can actually select from all my supported languages. So if I now select English, I write application, that's its translated version of the word application. Click save. Then I click new, I select Norwegian, I write the same key, except now I write the word in Norwegian. What I'm ending up with here actually is that I'm ending up with a key value dictionary, quote unquote, where every single local has its own translated version of that particular word, allowing me to use this key here as a lookup. Into my database for what word I should apply to a particular button or checkbox, etc., etc. And in fact, we can have a look at how that would work in the Magic Dashboard front end. If I now click Show Endpoints here, and I click F12 to inspect what goes over the wire, and then I find my languages HTTP REST endpoint, it's GET invocation here. Then you see when I invoke this thing, what's being returned actually, and you can see it here in the network tab. You can see what's actually being returned is every single supported language in my system. This would typically end up in my front end to being transformed into flags of supported languages, and then allowing the user to click his own flag to get his own translated version of my end application. And in addition, the local parts here is also a lookup into my translations get HTTP REST endpoint. So if I'm now interested in returning, first of all, I can just invoke it flat out like this, at which point I'm getting every single translated unity here. But typically, I'm not interested in every single translated unity. Here you can see I have English, here I have English, here I have Norwegian, and here I have Norwegian. When the user has selected his particular language of choice, right, then he would only retrieve those items that are relevant to his particular language. Well, actually, Magic allows us to filter according to each of our columns. So this allows us to click the local.eq, and if I only want to have the Norwegian translated entities, then I type in equal NO, and I'm now having every single Norwegian translated unity returned back to the client over an HTTP REST invocation. And that, of course, is the point. Notice, however, this HTTP REST invocation here by default will only return maximum of, I think it's 5 items, but you can explicitly override it by typing ampersand limit equal, for instance, 1000. If you happen to have 1,000 translated unities in your end database, that would return all 1,000 items in one invocation. And of course, at this point from my front end, I now have 2 HTTP REST endpoints for any one of my enterprise development apps. That actually allows me to return my supported languages in my enterprise, in addition to every single translated unity for every single particular button, checkbox, label, etc. I happen to need in my front-end system. And of course, I created the entirety of the code in 1 second. And I have an administrative front end here from where I can allow my translator users within my company to log in. And I can show that if I log out. Remember, I created a John user. John. Log in with John, and I'm here, and I can already start translating items. This allows me to have employees within my company that has the job of translating entities into Spanish or Chinese or French or whatever, gain access to this front-end dashboard administrative web app to allow them to translate on a per-need basis, as my company requires to have translated keys and things like that. Yet again, there's a link there are several links in the description of this YouTube video. First of all, there's a link to where you can download Magic. There's a link to another YouTube video where I illustrate how you can set up Magic. And there is a link to a DSON article where you can find my SQL code and my Angular front-end HTML code. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.